right, welcome back, fellow jazz bums. Today we are speaking with Max Gerl. We are super excited to have him join us today. Before we jump into it, remember to like and subscribe, join the Jazz Bums Discord, and then also we live stream every Friday, so come hang out with us there. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Felipe to get us started.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining. Welcome back to the channel. So today we have born and raised in Dallas, Texas, bass player, bassist, composer, producer. He graduated from Berklee College in 2017 with a scholarship, been performing internationally, has been recording and performed with artists such as Arturo Sandoval, Veronica Swift, Blake Dynamite, Mackay McCraven, Sasha Berliner, Stanley Clark, and many others. He also performs and teaches privately. It's a highly requested musician nowadays in the LA scene and nationally. And now he's in a very prolific era of his career. He's just released a solo bass record on JMI, which you're going to definitely talk about. And has two more projects just coming out, very fresh from the oven. His first record, however, was called Tbilisi, released in 2019. Now talking about his new record and more future projects and his life and career. Welcome to the channel, Max Gerl. Thank you, Max.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here.
As a fellow Texan, I was really interested to see that you went to Booker T. Washington and all that. Can you talk about like your upbringing? I know your parents were musicians here in Dallas, and kind of just your evolution as a musician, as a child, into getting into playing bass.
Absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, thank you guys again for having me. This is super cool. I think we're gonna have some fun. So both my parents are musicians. So in a way, it was sort of a little bit of a join the family business thing. But they're both violists, and so my mom plays in the Dallas Symphony, and my dad does a lot of contracting around town. And he also plays really good gypsy style rhythm guitar. So there's a lot of different musical influences that I was around when I was younger. And like I remember going to elementary school, and at the time the CD players were still the thing, the handheld CD players. And all of my my peers at the school, they all had like the new 50-cent CD. I remember like Linkin Park had just started putting records out, so everybody had those. And I came to school and I had Astor Piazzolla CD. That had some weird reactions amongst my classmates, but that's sort of the musical environment that I was in, going to my mom's concerts and then hearing the music that my dad would play also. And so it was a very eclectic mix and an eclectic background. And it's a rich musical community there in Dallas that by the time I was 3, 4, I had friends taking piano lessons, and that seemed like the thing to do also. Just my friends are doing it, so I want to do it. And then that turned into wanting to play the saxophone when I got to the 4th grade school band. And then for Christmas that year, I had a buddy who got a guitar. And I figured, oh, cool, I'll get one too. We'll start a band. And he said, no, I'm a guitar player. You got to get a bass. So we saved up some money, got a bass, and fell head over heels with it, and just playing it all the time, pretending I was sick to stay home so I could practice. And I was super into rock and metal music at the time, so I would pretend to be sick, and I would pick a record. And so my mom would go to rehearsal with the symphony, and I'd say, okay, today I'm going to learn this whole record.
Nice.
And shedding and not really being aware of what that meant, just doing it for the love of it. And ended up applying to and being accepted to the Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing and Visual Arts, which has its great reputation, and was so fortunate to meet so many people that are now some of now still my closest friends and collaborators, like Mike Mitchell, Black Dynamite, like the record that you have behind you there, Chris.
Yep.
And it was just an invaluable education. And the way it worked there is that if you were going to be a Booker T, you either did classical or you did jazz. And I had known from an early age that I didn't really want to pursue the classical route, which as I'm getting older now, I'm wanting to do that more and more. Yeah, so I went the jazz route, and we had this jazz director there, Bart Morant, who was serious. He was tough, really tough on you, but he'd push you. If he saw that there was potential, then he would really, dig into you. Yeah, an incredible experience, and ended up getting a scholarship to go to Berkeley, and spent 4 incredible years there with some unbelievable teachers whose names I'm sure I will mention at some point later on. Yeah, and so got out of there, and since then I've just been very fortunate to have a career in this field, getting to do what I love with this music that means so much to me.
Yeah. Could we talk about your time at Berkeley? What is so like what was were you on like a particular curriculum or path there? And what was your experience and who were your mentors?
Yes, absolutely. So when I got there, I was going for a performance degree, which fairly typical. I just basically played all the time. And there were other degree programs there that were really cool. I really liked the idea of CWP, which is contemporary writing and production. And I think that that's probably, for people that want to be actively involved in the writing and recording of music, that's probably the best degree plan they have there, because you get so much of both worlds, the technology and also the writing skills. But I just went after performance because all I wanted to do was play. Like at the time I didn't want anything else. I just wanted to be on the scene, working every night. That's by the time I left Dallas, that's how it was for me there. Like I remember leaving for Berkeley, and the first couple of weeks while I was still trying to kind of figure out my place there, I remember thinking like, well, this is kind of weird because I'm here to learn how to play so I can work 7 nights a week. I was already working 7 nights a week at home. And so there was a little bit of a difficulty there, just to, kind of taking a step back. Like I'm here to, one step forward, 1 step back, 18 steps forward, and so I was really fortunate to get around some people there that were able to steer me pretty quickly. And the first thing when I got there, everybody said, you need to get with Hal Crook, who's this trombone player and legendary educator, known the world over, but especially in like the New England jazz scene. He's just this pillar of jazz education. And so what he would do is it was either 4 or 6 ensembles. By the time I got there, he didn't do any improv classes anymore, but he had ensembles, and that was what you wanted to do. If you did jazz at Berkeley, like you either wanted to get with Hal, or you wanted to do the Global Jazz Institute or spend time with Ralph Peterson. But Hal was like as high as it went. And his class essentially was how to play like the Second Miles Quintet, sort of, where like kind of anything can happen if you can move as a group. Like you can't just do whatever because it tickles your fancy. But his whole thing was, okay, so we've had 5 minutes of saxophone solo, we've had 5 minutes of piano solo, now it's the bass solo. We've been going for 10 minutes already. How are you going to keep this interesting? Like, what can you do with the information you have? He would always talk about the micro versus the macro view. So what's big picture, what's happened? Like, what's been the overall shape of the whole thing? Little picture, like, what motifs have you hinted at in how you're playing? What idea have you presented that you can take and develop? Or has the cat before you, have they been super developmental in their motif? Maybe it's just time for some time and changes, stuff like that. These really small considerations and these concepts that I think sometimes feel intangible. He had a way of making them tangible, like he could communicate them. And he could, whatever instrument you played, he could tell you what your problem was and how to fix it within 30 seconds. It's unreal. The guy was just an absolute guru, and anybody that went through him would say the same. But so he was a main one. I don't think a day goes by I don't think about a Halism when I'm playing. So him and I was really lucky to have a number of phenomenal instrumental teachers. Steve Bailey, who runs the department, the bass department, he was incredibly helpful for me, and made sure I was around the right people. And I spent a few semesters with John Lockwood, which was incredible. David Buddha was great. My last year, I got to spend the full year with James Genus, and that was really, really wild. Because with him, we would get into the lessons, and we would just pick a tune and we play a little bit. And after the second lesson, he kind of said, like, okay, so like you can play. Like I don't need to show you how to play the bass. But what do you want to do? And my big dream in life was I wanted to play with Chick Corea. So I told him, I want to play with Chick. I want to play with the Legends. I want to do the thing. And he said, okay, well, probably the best thing we can do for training that is, and he's been with Herbie's band for 20 plus years now. He'd say, he would come in and he'd be like, yeah, I was with Herbie last night. Here's the chart we played. This is one of Leonardo Lueke's tunes in like 21/8 or whatever. And he just put it in front of me, 20 seconds, put a metronome on, go. And then and this is just with bass and a metronome, so you're trying to read the part because it's so complex. Yeah. Then he would say, okay, that's great, you played the notes, where's the music? Where are you choosing to put a little bit of sauce? Where are you choosing to be rigid? And I remember the first time I played it just straight down. He said, okay, do the same thing, but put some spice on it, just put some stuff in there. And I put like a little fill in there, and he said, why did you choose there? And I said, well, it seemed like it made sense to me. He said, yeah, but there's a line in the melody happening right there. So what you're doing is you're obfuscating the melody by choosing there for the fill. And so I said, well, but we're not playing. I'm not hearing the melody. He said, it's in front of you. That should be good enough. And it's like little things like that, those sort of real world skills that were really helpful to have somebody who's in it to say, like, this is the kind of stuff that needs to be automatic.
Yeah.
Well,
you want to play at.
Yeah.
So that was incredible. And I got so much from my time with John Patitucci there. He's really sort of my guru of what it means to deal with the bass itself. And he would come to Berkeley once every month, and he would do a week of master classes, and he would do private lessons and semi-private lessons. So anytime he was there, I would sign up, and sometimes he would have ones that were dedicated to the electric bass and some that were dedicated to the acoustic bass, and they were all incredible. Yeah, there's like one that stands out in my memory. It's not because of anything he said. By the time I was getting out of school, I was telling him, I have this dream to play with Chick, and I know that that's your lifelong collaborator. And he was very encouraging. He said, you should go after that goal. That's a good thing. That would be a good thing for you to pursue. And he said, he wrote down a set list, and he said, I'm going to Europe with the electric band this coming month. Here's the set list we're doing. Like, you want to play with them? Show me. When I'm back, have this ready. And that happened right before spring break. And so I was going to go home to Texas. I canceled the flight, and just 9 hours a day running everything, like learned the melodies, learned the bass lines, learned every solo from everybody on there, learned everything, like backwards and forwards this whole set.
Wow.
And so he comes back, and I get in the room, and we're getting ready to do the lesson. And I'm like, okay, I got something. I've been working. I got some stuff together. And he just sat down and plugged his electric bass in. And he just played, I think, like 3 open strings just to check the volume. And just the sound and the presence of those 3 notes through the amp. I don't think I played anything in that whole lesson that equaled the same amount of just weight that he put in 3 notes to check his volume. And like that's always stood out to me, that just on like a foundational, like mitochondrial level as a bass player, that guy is just absurd. So it's stuff like that I always think about is like sort of the bar, and having those experiences of being around those cats that are just so
Absolutely.
incredible, and as sort of where I set the bar for myself. Like, okay, well, at the time he was 60, so all right, so I got 35 years to get to that level. This is sort of how I like to think about it, But yeah, I was really fortunate with all of these people. And Tia Fuller was another one that I learned a lot from, being in her ensemble at Berkeley my last year. And it was really just an incredible experience. It's and the thing about Boston, there's not a ton of places to play, so that's challenging.
Mhm.
But I think I would trade the experience for anything. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like we lost Felipe, but that sounds incredible. I mean, that sounds like Berkeley was a great experience.
And one more thing about Berkeley, it's also what I needed at the time that I was there. Whenever I was applying for schools, it was actually 4th on my list. I really wanted to go to New England Conservatory and do the uber hardcore, super avant-garde stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an early audition at Berkeley. And so by the time I left for winter break my senior year of high school, I knew that I had gotten in, that I had a full scholarship. So that made it a little easier to do the process,
For sure.
you know. But the thing too, when I got there, my second year, I started having these tendonitis problems, and so they're, you know, kind of like on and off over the course of like a 4 or 5 year span of time. I think I couldn't play the acoustic for 3 out of like that 4 year span, and so I had to deal with the electric, which I started before, but I wasn't serious about it at the time, and I don't think really any other jazz conservatory program, you know, this is only speculation, but I can't imagine that those programs would have been particularly happy about me only playing electric in there. And it forced me to find a way to navigate jazz on the electric bass and also develop like skills in other styles. Like, well, I gotta play electric. So if somebody needs me on like a pop gig or something, if I'm on a gig where I gotta, you know, just play pocket and then play key bass, let me develop those skills. That's what I have to do right now because that's what's available to me. And those are all skills that have directly impacted the way that I feel about feeling, really, like whenever I'm in the jazz world, like what it's supposed to feel like a good pocket is. And I sort of always have this thing that just because it's swing doesn't mean it shouldn't feel as good as an Earth, Wind and Fire record. You know, like it's, at the end of the day, like if you can't dance to it, then for me, I feel like I'm sort of fundamentally not doing it right, regardless of the genre.
Before we move on past the college experience, when early on when you were auditioning, just a couple questions around that. Your audition piece. Well, one, I'd be curious to know like what the auditioning kind of format is, and is that something that you were working on throughout your high school experience to kind of build up to an audition for your college applications? And what did you select to do?
Yeah.
Well, so for the auditions, I'd done a good amount of inspecting all of the requirements lists, like a good bit before I got there. So I've been working on with my teachers, and it was mostly just standards. It was just, you know, how do you play on standards? So I think just the regular shedding that I'm doing is building towards what the auditions are going to be. And when I did the Berkeley audition, that they did it in Fort Worth, Texas, because, you know, they send people all over the place to just go do regional auditions. So I did one that was about 45 minutes from where I grew up. And I figured this is advantageous because I can bring like my trio. Because, you know, in the room they have, you know, everything set up. I mean, they're hearing every instrument, they're hearing it in the same room. So I knew they were going to have drums, I knew they were going to have a piano. And at the time I was spending a lot of time with Lynn Seaton at North Texas and kind of shedding with him and trying to study with him. So I was starting to get around a lot of the UNT cats, and just also being on the scene, they would come down to Dallas proper to gig. So I met this piano player named Colin Campbell, who at the time had just got out of UNT, and he had been in 1 o'clock and did the whole thing there. And he was very generous with his time and made a bunch of pre-screening recordings with me. And he drove out to Fort Worth to do the audition with me, and a great drummer named Joe Palmer. And funny enough, I chose a blues. We played Billy's Bounce.
Oh, nice.
And I don't remember why I picked that, but I kind of remember thinking like at the time with our group of friends and I, we were really into Wayne's music, into Wayne Shorter's music. We weren't as deep into the bop tradition. I didn't really come to that until later on. But so I wanted something that like could showcase one of my strengths, which at the time I felt was extended harmony over a traditional harmonic backdrop. And that was one of Colin's strengths on piano as well. He could really take it there. So I figured, let's play something like easy, start it polite, and let's just go to space with it and then bring it back. I felt that was a good showcase for what I like to do and what I felt I did well. And we just happened to have one of those days where everything went right. Just caught a little bit of lightning in a bottle, and it just so happened to be in front of the audition panel, fortunately. So we did the one piece, and then they asked a couple of questions, and I don't remember what those were. I also brought the electric bass with me because I wanted them to know that I played both basses. And I didn't play anything with the group with them. I just basically pulled it, plugged it in, and noodled for a few minutes. Like, okay, so they played electric bass. And they do in your training thing where And this one I did practice for. They do an ear training thing where one of the panelists would go to the piano and they essentially just, you know, play some notes. They give you a starting note and they would tell you what it is, and then they would just move it around to see where your relative pitch was, your intervallic awareness. And then you said, well, you know, why don't you improvise over these? It's sort of an ear training test, and they do a sight reading thing. And, you know, starting piano 3, I was a pretty decent reader by that point. So everything sort of lined up for it to work out the way that it did. You know, it was an audition that the way that it happened to go, definitely my strengths at the time were sort of fine-tuned for that.
So, so Max, now you finished Berkeley, you start playing and touring. So how was this transition, and how did you end up in LA?
So that's an interesting story. So I mentioned the tendon problems that I'd had. I get out of school, I get out of Berkeley, and I've got an aunt and uncle that live in New York. And at this point, I'm thinking, you know, I'm studying with Fatucci with James Genius, and they're telling me, like, you know, maybe you should check out New York, and, you know, every now and then you can still, whenever we're home, you can take a lesson. We can help get you in the scene, stuff like that. So it seems obvious. Let's go to New York. And then within 2 months of when I got out of school, I couldn't play either bass. I couldn't play anything, couldn't touch anything. Just my elbows were in such a bad state. And I mean, like, couldn't turn doorknobs. And like, in my mind, I thought it was done. Because you hear about musicians all the time that, you know, they have these repetitive stress injuries and they can't get it back. So I kind of figured, well, that's what's happened here, and it was heartbreaking because I figured, oh, I just got out of school and I've got the approval of these masters that I respect so much, and now I can't even play. So what do I do? And I kind of figured, well, I mean, all of my earthly possessions fit inside my car, and I'm living with my aunt and uncle, so I'm not paying rent, so I might as well go up there and check it out and see what happens anyway. And through some stuff, you know, my arms started getting better, and I get to New York and I can play the electric. I got no problem with the electric, but I still can't deal with the acoustic. It was a few years before I could get back on the upright. But I get to New York, and that's a tough scene to operate in with no upright. So I wasn't really working, but I'm going out and I'm checking stuff out. And I get a call over the Christmas holidays from a piano player in LA named Cameron Graves, who came through the West Coast Get Down system, plays Kamasi Washington's band. At the time, played in Stanley Clark's band, which is where he met Mike Black Dynamite, who were best friends growing up. So Cameron has put out a record with Mac Avenue called The Planetary Prince. And he calls Mike and he says, hey man, I got this 3-week Europe tour, and I want you on drums. Who do you want on bass? And God bless Mike, he says, you need to call my boy. And so, and Cameron and I, we played once a few years ago, and we had a good time hanging and all, but I haven't heard from him since. So I just get this text, says, hey, I've got this 3-week tour in Europe. Do you want it? And
Nice.
I was like, can we start now? Can we go right now? And we had it was a few months from, I think the tour was in April and he talked to me in December. So I got back to New York from the Christmas holidays, and I was just thinking, because, you know, I mean, as you know about how Mike plays, I mean, this is some of the most virtuosic drumming in the history of human existence. So there's that. And then Cameron is sort of similar on piano, where just the facility and the command of the instrument and the harmonic depth is so extreme that I remember thinking, like, I need to be at the absolute best that I possibly can, or I'm going to hold these cats up. And I don't want to be responsible for holding up musicians of this magnitude. So I was always a pretty dedicated shedder. Like, I'm about the practice life. I'm meditative for me. I'm very into it, but I like entered a type of shedding that I don't think I'd practiced that intensely before, where I mean, this would go until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, nonstop. Wow. And part of that was also just being so excited that I was even able to play, because this was still so fresh from a point where I thought I was going to sell insurance or something. I didn't know. So just, you know, just every minute playing it was a celebration. Man, thank God I could do this. And so we end up leaving for the tour, and we do the first gig. and it was kind of whatever. It wasn't a great gig, and and we were in Rouen, France. I'm butchering the pronunciation. Somewhere in northern France. And we got out and didn't really rehearse. We kind of showed up and winged it because Cameron's music at the time was a lot of modal stuff, so where the heads were really simple. And once we were into it, kind of anything could happen. But we would kind of start, and it's like, okay, so 8 bars of B flat minor, and then 8 bars of E flat 7. That would be the form, and then we would just go. And we didn't really rehearse. I didn't really know how to play freely in that context. So the first gig was a lot of sort of the 3 of us fumbling because it was a new band essentially. And I remember getting off the stage and just being so upset and thinking like, oh my God, we got 20 more of these. And this is not a great start. And I talked to a friend of mine that night who's a dancer, and she kind of had the perspective, and I was just venting all of these frustrations, and she mentioned to me basically like, hey, like I hear what you're saying and I understand your frustration. Like, you did the work to be here. You're here because you did that work. I trust your preparation. Just go out there and play. If it sucks, it sucks, but trust the prep and just go out there and, work for the music and figure out the rest later. And I remember thinking, well, I mean, yeah, sounds like a good plan. Let's give that a try.
Yeah.
And the next gig, we were in Stockholm at Fasching, and the gig was pretty good. So I remember thinking, okay, all right, starting to get somewhere. And like as a trio, we're moving better, and we're able to go in directions as a unit. Where like Mike on drums would want to take one of Cameron's rhythmic motifs and just go to a new time, a la Tony Williams and Herbie. And I needed to just find a way to be the Ron Carter of the situation and find a way to facilitate that and make it smooth. And it was a little bit more well balanced in that gig in Stockholm. And then some of the solos, I felt like I played some stuff that I had earned the right to that solo by the end of it. These guys are just playing so much stuff, just playing just this unbelievable stuff. And I mean, Cameron would take these ridiculous improvisations, and he'd finish, and he's a super just like happy, smiley, giggly dude. So he'd be like, "Haha, that was crazy, you got it." Like, what am I going to do after this on the bass? So it just the level that I was being pushed to by those guys was so intense. And that was like one of the few gigs where, as a bass player, like you need to improvise. Like if you're not really saying much in your solos, that's like one gig where that doesn't really work. And so Fasching went really well. And I remember thinking, okay, like I'm onto something. Like I found like a way of thinking and like a mindset to try and get myself into that seems to work. And so the next gig was Friday night, completely sold out at Ronnie Scott's.
Nice.
And that's jazz. That's
legendary.
Yeah, it's legendary, and especially growing up, you see all the stuff with Sonny Rollins there, and my uncle is super into rock guitar stuff, so I would always listen to Jeff Beck at Ronnie's, stuff like that. So, and you know what that means in that world. And we went in there and we just burned it down. It was absurd. Like that third gig, we really found it as a trio, and it was just incredible, and it was the best feeling. Because 2 gigs ago, I remember thinking like, man, these guys hate me. I'm holding, the tour is going to be terrible. And it's going to be my fault. And then, a few gigs later, we're sold out at this legendary spot. And we just had this incredible gig. And it ended up, the rest of the tour ended up being just a dream. And I think back on that all the time. And it was intense. We played 18 shows in 21 days.
Whew.
And we flew every city. So we were up at like 4 a.m. every day. And, Mike and I at the time, we were 23. So everywhere we go, we're meeting people and we want to go out and like, so like what liquor is exclusive to this country? Let's go try that. So we're doing these gigs, and we grew up together having this dream, and we've been doing it with Stanley for years. This was my first time, like, I'm on tour in Europe playing super high level improvisational music. This is what I dreamed of doing my whole life, and I get to do it with my best friend. So it was a ball. It was just such a good time. I always look back, and there's like a little like element of chasing the dragon with that for me. Like anytime there's a Europe tour on the way there, it's always like, man, I wonder how this is going to stack up next to that first one.
Yeah.
Which I shouldn't do. There's no reason for that sort of comparison, but it was really a beautiful experience. And then also like getting through it with like the physical issues that I was having, feeling like, okay, I can trust my body. I can trust myself to figure it out, whatever the situation is. And that gave me a lot of confidence going forward to know that like I can start something and be pretty rough, but like I believe in my ability to figure out what I need to do to at least get through the tour and get through the gig and not hold the band up. So that was that first one. And so after I started playing with Cameron, and then I didn't have any dates with him after that. I just had the tour, and I'm hoping like I hope I get the call back. I hope we do more. And we finished the tour, and then a month later he calls me and he says, "Hey, so we got Montreal Jazz Festival, Warsaw Summer Jazz Days, and then we got North Sea. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yeah, please send me the ticket today." Send me the ticket today. And so then we do the festival run, and Cameron was still playing with Stanley at the time, and Stanley's band was playing the same day as us at North Sea. So we finished his set, and then he's like, "Okay, great tour, see you guys," and he runs over to the other stage to go play with Stanley.
Oh man.
And so I'm like, well, I mean, I want to see this because also the other keys player in Stanley's band at the time, Becca Gochashvili, is a good friend of mine. So I want to go see him too, and just also go see bass legend Stanley. So we're hanging backstage in the area, and that's the end of the tour for me. So I have a glass of wine, and Stanley walks up, and I'm kind of thinking, oh man, this is heavy. This is getting heavy. And Cameron says, "Hey Stan, you remember Max, right?" "What is this?" And so he says, "Yeah, of course." So I don't realize the whole time that he has been in his band, he's been telling Stanley like, "Man, I got my bass player back home. He's working really hard. He's trying to get some stuff together." And Stanley is super tapped in with all the young bass players. Like if you're a young bass player with something to say, you can trust that Stanley has seen it in some way, shape, or form.
Nice.
Yeah. So I find out that he's essentially been following my progress for 4 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
he says, "It's great to meet you in person. I've been following you, Cameron, Becca, and Mike. They've all been talking about you. I really like what you do. I really like your obvious work ethic. And yeah, nice to meet you." And then they go on stage. So just the rest of that day was just on cloud nine. I mean, it's an insanely cool thing to have something like that happen.
Absolutely.
And so we hang the rest of the day, and the next morning, Stanley's band and Cam's trio, we all had the same lobby call for the airport. We were going in the same shuttle. And Stan and I were the first ones down. We were the first ones to make the lobby call. So classic bass player thing, first ones there. And we get to, shooting the breeze a little bit. And he said, "Man, actually, real quick, take my number down. If you're ever in LA, give me a call and come hang at the house." And so at the time, I get back to New York, and I was having just the day-to-day lifestyle there wasn't really working for me. I was just having a hard time functioning in the concrete jungle, having grown up in Texas around trees and stuff. And so I figured, again, all my earthly possessions fit in my car. And then living with my aunt and uncle, I wasn't, I didn't have a lease. So we'll go check out LA. So I went back to Dallas for a few months, did some gigs, saved some money. And went out there. My gigs are in LA, and I'm not working here. And I've been here for a little over 5 years now. And it was the best decision for me, and I'm so happy that I did it, because every day is a pleasure.
So did you followed up and hung out with Stanley Clark at his house?
I sure did. Yeah, I got here and I got settled in, and coincidentally, I happened to move into a neighborhood that's only like 15 minutes from his house.
Okay.
And he lives up in Topanga, this really beautiful area, and I happened to just move like kind of on the outskirts of town because it's what I could afford.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened to be near his place. And so I get there and I call him and I say, "Hey, so not only did I decide to come hang out, I actually moved here." And he said, "Okay, cool. You want to come hang?" I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Cool. Here's my address. Come over tomorrow night." So I go over to his place, and I brought the bass with me because I don't really know what's going to happen. Like, I mean, because by this point, like, in my mind, he hasn't seen me play, so he might not know if I can play. And so I get there and I have the bass in, like the first thing he shakes my hand, he's like, yeah, you can put that down. We don't need that. Let's just hang.
Oh, cool.
So we just sit down and we're hanging and he's telling all these stories like, oh yeah, I was hanging with Chick and Miles at the Vanguard and, you know, blankety blank, blank, blank happened or whatever.
Oh,
He's
man.
telling all those kinds of things, just those stories that there's only so many cats that are still around that can talk about that time.
Yeah.
You know, and just trying to get that information and that feeling, you know, he's communicating that to me. And so, you know, we get done hanging and telling stories and he, you know, he says, well, you know, you're in LA now, so what are you doing? Like, are you working? Like, what's going on? And I was fortunate. I started working pretty quick, and I wasn't like rich or anything, but I was working enough to pay my bills. And so he says, all right, so, you know, you're gigging, you're working. What do you want to do? And at the time, I started writing some of my own music. So I told him I want to do my own music, and I also, like, my dream is to play with Chick. And I, you know, I'd spent so many years with Patitucci telling him I want to play with Chick, and then here I am at Stanley's house, like the other sort of legendarily affiliated with Korea bass player, and I tell him, well, I want to play with Chick, and he says, you know, I'm pretty tight with Chick, right? Yeah, I would assume so, yes. And he basically told me that he says, you know, you'd be a good fit. You play both basses, and at the time I did not play both basses. At the time I still only played the electric, so I was like, yes, I do play both basses. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, so tomorrow I need to start figuring out how to get back on the acoustic. Okay. You know, because I've essentially just sort of in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I've written a check that now I need to figure out a way to cash. But he told me, he said, well, do you have a record? And I said, well, no, not yet. He said, okay, if you get a record, then I can consider giving it to him and telling him that you would like to play with them. Like, if that's something that you would be interested in.
Okay.
So that, you know, the next day, like, just woke up and like, was like blinders, tunnel vision, get a record, get going on the acoustic again. Just, that's the only thing that mattered. And was able to turn that. I don't know how this happened, but got the record done from, I kid you not, start to finish for like $600, Tbilisi.
Wow.
Okay.
And like, I, you know, the musicians that played on that record were so generous with me with their time, because I called them and I said, yo, I don't have any money, but I want to do 5 rehearsals in a recording session. And I've only got like this tiny little amount, and not a single one of them batted an eye. They all said happy to be involved. And so like I'll like any of those cats that, like Paul, Aaron, and Mike, that if they called me and they said, hey, we got these gigs, but we got no money, we're done. Just because of how they you know, were so generous with their time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Tbilisi. And I kind of spent, you know, we did the recording and we did it in just one room. Nothing was isolated. The piano was open and the ride cymbal was a foot away from the open piano. Like, I mean, we basically made a live record. And
that's cool.
So it was a good time. And I mean, there is an energy that's on that record that whenever I listen to it, I don't listen to it that often, but I'll check back in like once a year just to see like how am I changing? Because like the record doesn't change, but it's like, how do I perceive it differently? How am I changing to the record that hits me differently? And every year that goes by, it gets a little bit more intense to me. There are parts of that record, it's like, wow, we are going for it. But like, I don't think we would have gotten that if we were all in 4 separate isolated booths, you know, and that made some mixing not possible. We actually recorded 6 songs for that record, and 2 of them I felt we couldn't use because there were things that happened that to me were critical ensemble flaws. There was just no way to fix it in the mix, if you will. Nothing was isolated, so there's no way to remove certain things.
Right. So you got the record out. You gave it to Stanley, and Stanley forwarded it along to Chick.
Well, that I don't know, and I never asked, because I've spent every day wondering if he had, but I kind of felt that you know, this guy's being so generous with his time with me, And
Never
he's
know.
being so encouraging. Like the last thing I want to do is be nagging on him, like, hey.
Yeah.
And he didn't necessarily, he didn't put it in these words, and he didn't say this, but there was a little bit of a thing where I could tell that without him having to say it, there was a thing of like, you got to wait your turn a little bit. Like,
Okay.
like, you know, Chick's got his band. He's not going to fire his band because some hotshot showed up and is champing at the bit to play with him. That's not how this goes, you know? And at the time, you know, Carlitos de Puerto had been with him for 10 years at that point already. And I think Carlitos got the gig with him. No, I think Carlitos is mid 40s now. So he probably would have been mid to late 30s at the time that he started playing with Chick. And at the time that this was happening, I was 24. So but in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm 24. I'm ancient. Like, if it's not going to happen now, what is it going to happen? Was the feeling, which is in retrospect ludicrous. But as time has gone on, the perspective on that time is definitely made more sense. But I had that year, and with Stanley, we did the Detroit Jazz Festival with Cameron, and Stanley was also playing, and Cameron was playing with him. So we're doing our sound check. This was kind of the moment where I feel like the only time I ever felt where there was like a let's see what you got moment with Stanley was at Detroit, because we're getting ready to do the sound check with Cameron. And I'm like messing with my amp, and I hear Cameron say, hey, you know, Stan's in the crowd. And I turn around, and Stanley's front row, and he's got the shades on, the leather jacket, and he's got his arms, he's looking at me like this. It's just like his whole body language screamed like, you're talking a big game about what you want to do. Let's see what you got. You know, and whether or not that was his intention, like, I mean, I'm sure I was projecting that onto him, but that's how it read to me at the time. I think like the first 3 songs of the set, I was playing like this. Like, I embarrassed myself. And you know, by the time we got to the end of the gig, you know, I relaxed, and we had a really good gig. And we got done with the gig, and he comes backstage. He's like, man, and you know, with the way Mike plays, it's rhythmically as a bass player, you got to be a rock. But it's tough because like the way Mike manipulates the time, you have to be a rock with the ability to interpret where he's moving the tempo. And the only reason that I feel like we do it so well is because we've been doing it for 15 years at this point. But so we get done with the gig, and Stan comes backstage, and he says, man, you are a tree up there. Much respect. Just like,
Nice.
And then and it's funny because then also, you know, Becca was in his band at the time. My friend, the piano player Becca Gocciatoli, and he'd taken a video of a solo that I'd taken during the gig, and he was sitting with Stanley. And there's a point in the video where you can hear Stanley say to Becca, he goes, man, he is killing right now. And like, and you know, he never said, like, Stanley never said anything that like just like overtly complimentary, but like knowing that was there, that's something that like that is just giving me a lot of confidence in general. And to help me find that within myself, to where I'm not looking for it from outside sources, just because that's not a recipe for good mental health. But you know, it's been an incredible experience having my relationship with him, and he's been amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about JMI now. How did you get hooked up with those guys in the first record, the solo record?
So actually, I got hooked up with them also through Mike, because we started doing a record for Mike with JMI in 2019.
Right.
And I think we did 3 days in the studio, and they sent the recordings to Steve and Jake. And from what I understand, it was something to the effect of they heard him, they're like, yo, who's this bass player? Or something like that. And so Jake reached out to me, and he said, hey, you know, we've heard Tbilisi, we dig it, we've heard you on Mike's recordings. Next time you're in New York, let's hang, let's get a coffee, let's get a drink, whatever. So January 2020, Mike and I are playing at Rockwood Music Hall in New York. And so Jake is like, okay, I'm gonna come check it out. So we hang a little bit, and we go back to the JMI office and just kind of shoot the breeze and talk about records that we like, stuff like that. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, oh, is he gonna offer me a contract? Is this how it happens? And kind of nothing happened. We just hung, and he was like, "Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I'll drop you back at your hotel." And we kind of left it on a note of like, I feel like we get along well. I hope we get to work together in the future, which felt like pretty nebulous, but it still felt like a positive. And then, of course, a few months later, the world shut down,
Right.
and that was the end of thinking about that. And fast forward a few years, 2022. I'm sort of doing a little bit of slow season, so I'm sort of doing a little bit of a cattle call. Like, well, just letting certain people know, like, hey, I've got extra time right now. If you need anybody, we'll love to work. And I happened to reach out to Jake, just, hey, we haven't spoken in a few years, but if you need, bass, anybody to come in and be a sideman, like, I'd love to work with you guys. And he wrote back, said, actually, we were kind of wanting to do this solo upright record. Do you want it? And like, that's how it happened. Like, absolutely. And, we ironed out the details, had the contract signed in hand within a few days. And it was really that simple. And yeah, so that's how it worked. And we did the first record, and I think that we both felt so good about the way that it had gone that it seemed like an easy partnership to continue. I think Jake, Steve, and I think we work really well together.
Right. So Max, sorry. You want to go here, Chris?
I was just gonna say, let's look at that record real quick. So this is the solo bass record you did on JMI.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So it's up for pre-order. I think it's coming out pretty soon.
I believe so. Sounds about right.
So here are the guys. So there's you in the room. And yeah, so this is up for pre-order at JMI. I think I sampled a couple things on JMI's Instagram. I was able to hear a few things. So I think if you're interested in checking out some samples, you can look at that. I don't know if it's available on Spotify just yet.
It is. It's out on streaming.
Okay, all right. So you can check it out on streaming, and this is up for pre-order. So this is the solo bass record, and we also know that you're doing another title. I'm sorry to jump around too much, but I did want to kind of show this one here. So this is a duo with Mike, and the title is great, Hard Pan. It's like a throwback to the old school, like 50s Van Gelder Hackensack pan thing. So I really love that, and the cover design is pretty cool too.
Yeah, they went above and beyond with those colors, that's for sure.
No, sure. So Max, one thing I was wondering, I mean, the record came out last year, right? Digitally, the physical format is imminent. We have been talking to other musicians, and one thing is most of these records coming out in 23, early 24, late 22, most of them were written, composed, kind of, during COVID times. People are like close at home, and they're just writing music, and now everything's kind of coming out now. What's behind the writing process for your solo bass? It was back then, it was something new. What's your main line that you're following in this record, like in terms of like writing, composition? What's your main idea there?
Well, so it was kind of a mixture of both of those. The main one that definitely carried over from during the pandemic time was Language of the Unheard. And that's not directly that came from an improvisation during the worldwide protest over George Floyd's murder. And it just was sort of a moment that just felt so turbulent and powerless. And it sort of in a moment just happened to noodle, like, okay, well, I can't talk, I can't do anything, there's nothing to do. And it sort of just came out and completely just noodled out, like almost in the entire format that it is then. And so I called it Language of the Unheard because at the time, there were so many people that were saying, oh, well, of course it's wrong, but the writers are really the ones who are wrong. And having grown up in Texas, there's a lot of coded language like that that's really, there's just a lot of stuff where it's like, you're not saying what I know you want to say, but you can't. And so I always remembered I remember reading in the Martin Luther King Jr. book, Why We Can't Wait, just the concept where he says a riot, a riot is the language of the unheard, and that always really stuck with me. And I feel like people, and this is, I'm a great admirer of Dr. King, and I always thought it was so interesting that people use him as an example of, oh well, just wait quietly, wait peacefully, and I mean, this is a cat that very much understood, like, who advocated for nonviolence, but absolutely understood the idea that if you do these things, you can't be surprised when hundreds of thousands of people get pissed and turn to the streets. Like, so, and that was sort of my concept there. Is it in a lot of ways was sort of a, because I'm not one to get in internet fights. That's not really my thing. But I'm just seeing all these people back home talking about all this, and it just felt so frustrating about, like, how can you not understand what's happening here? How is this the thing you're choosing to focus on? And so that was written years ago, and I had that very much in mind. And I kind of wanted to follow musically, like, the theme of that composition, which is theoretically you have, rhythm, melody, and harmony. And so a lot of the things that came from that point further on, specifically, name was way too long. I should have done that on that. Patience to Find the Start of the Journey's Path. And that one was definitely written with just like, I knew I wanted the song, like, no improv, nothing, just like a song in sort of like the bass folk song idea that Stanley pioneered. And, on his early records, he had bass folk song number, whatever. And they were just songs, like tunes. And I knew I wanted a few of those. And it was actually his idea to lead the record with that. I played it for him. He said, that's your single right there. Like, that's a very easy to understand statement for non-bass players. So that was that. A lot of the other ones, the ones that are marked as improvisations, I knew that I did want to essentially just go for it and see what came out, because so much of my writing is, let me just kind of mess around with an idea and see what happens, and if I find something I like, I'll develop it from there. And so because we were doing all of this straight to tape, essentially what we did, after I played the recorded pieces, we just put a reel on, and it would hold 16 minutes. So I said, okay, put a reel on. I'm just going to go for 16 minutes, and then we'll chop it up. We'll find the ones that we like. So we did one of those for acoustic and one of those for the electric. And the piece for Renat, the Arco piece, during the lockdown, my northern star of bass shedding was a Russian bassist named Renat Ibragimov, who was the principal bass player for the London Symphony for 20 years, something like that, since the mid-90s. And he passed away from COVID, unfortunately, during the pandemic. And if you hear this cat play, if you didn't know it was you would assume it's a cello. Just the way that he was able to manipulate the instrument, every note flawlessly in tune. Just an unbelievable player. I would get up, make a cup of coffee, watch his videos, and then go do long tones. In the morning, I would do my upright practice in the morning, and then I would take a little break and go outside, walk around the neighborhood, and then I would come back and I would make dinner, and then I would do my electric practice at night. And sort of how I broke my time up during the lockdown. But that piece was definitely, because in my mind, I remember, like, I just had this strong feeling like, when this is over, the next time I'm in London, I'm going to go and take a lesson with this guy. And then he passed. And sort of a similar thing with Chick also, where I got this dream, and every day I'm getting up like, okay, what am I going to do today that's going to get me a little bit more ready for when that call comes? And then he passed also. And so there was, I think, one of the themes of that record was mourning time past and what that looks like in different ways, and trying to sort of process what it means to be a young musician with dreams, and to realize some of those dreams aren't going to happen, and how you live with that and move forward, how you adapt to that, and it's things like that. I think that a lot of this record was sort of catharsizing those emotions.
Very cool. I really enjoyed that record, and I love the mix of the acoustic and electric, and then I think one or two of the tracks you play, you play bowed bass the whole time, which is really beautiful.
Thank you.
I think JMI is putting out some amazing solo records, which is pretty ballsy because like when they sent this amazing record right to us, I remember getting it and I was like, wow, this looks really cool. It's 2 LP solo drums. Like that's gonna be weird, right? Like how do you pull that off and make it actually interesting? And of course, Mike did it. I mean, it's an amazing record, and I think your record stacks up with that one. So,
Thank you.
anyway.
Yeah, I think in your playing, one thing that stuck with me, I heard one of your interviews. You said that's what I like about a six string because I have higher notes, so I can make things that people can hear and relate to. I think that comes across really nicely in your playing in this record.
No, so thank you. I appreciate that. I'm getting to be a little bit more adamant about that as time goes on as well. And when people ask about the six string, I like to say, well, I've got a low and a high note. I have my low boomies and I have my high pretties. And it's true, like bass players forget that like we hear it as bass players, we hear it great. But like I mean there's a bass player here in LA who is as technically proficient as there ever has been and ever will be. And I've had drummers who've done gigs with him and they've come back and they've said like, I can't hear anything he's playing. I don't hear it. Like, I see that he's doing crazy stuff. I don't hear it.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, well, how? The tone is so clear. It's like the tone is so good. He's like, I don't know, don't hear it. So that's something that's always stuck with me, that you can be playing the baddest stuff ever, but you play an instrument that it's just, you have to train your ear to hear it. And most people haven't and are not going to do that. So that's something to be considered.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of my favorite jazz, like old jazz records, are bass led, like Paul Chambers. I have the Sam Jones here. He has another one called Soul Society. And the way he attacks the strings, it's the most forward instrument of the mix. And like that, like, I think those are like special records and I really love them. So, yeah, I think it's great to be able to hear the bass. I do feel like it's something it's one of my favorite instruments. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of like the Jaco Pastorius record, right? His first solo record on Epic. I would say that some of your tunes reminded me of that from your solo record. Were making me think of that Jaco record, especially the electric bass parts. So,
well, that's high praise. Thank you.
Yeah, and I love the bass, and you're right. It's hard, especially with modern listeners, right? If someone's listening to a record on AirPods on their phone, the bass is going to be hard for them to really focus on, right? So,
yeah,
that's we're fortunate enough for them to take the AirPods out. That's assuming it's not just coming over the iPhone speaker, which at that point,
yeah. I was just listening to I just got a record, Mingus record, and it's an old one on Debut, which is his old label from I think it was a recording from '55, a live recording. And there's one track on it. It's just him and Max Roach. And Mingus starts with a bowed bass and then he goes to the traditional form. And then I think he bows again later on. But just that duo setting is so incredible. So yeah, I'm really excited for Hard Pan. I feel like that's going to be a killer record. And JMI, like, they're doing things that, I don't know, they're just doing really cool stuff, like the solo stuff, the duo stuff. These formats, I feel like, are some of the most interesting to me. I like that. So the fact that you're having both of those forms on JMI, definitely getting both of these records. Along with James Carter has a baritone sax solo record on there. I'm getting that. So I have a big card for my JMI.
Yeah, they're going to cost a lot of money in the next few months.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I appreciate so much about JMI is there's a willingness there's a clear willingness to put the art as the foremost priority. And that's so hard to find these days because we are all living in an era of inflation, of economic hardship. It's a tough time financially for everybody, no matter what you do. So to be in economic times such as these, and to have a couple of dudes who say we want to do the things that essentially can't be done just from a financial standpoint, it makes no sense. I really respect and admire their willingness to be art forward, and we want to do things that nobody else is going to do. Like I really admire and respect that about them, and that they expect it to be done at a high level. And as an artist like that, I found it really inspiring during my process of writing. Like these guys, we recorded in an incredible studio. We had Stanley come in to produce a session. They brought in Sebastian and Chris, who usually works more in the pop world, but is an unbelievable engineer. And Daniel Galindo, also another incredible engineer. Like they just put together such a crack team at a great studio that my feeling was, man, like I am not going to show up here and have these dudes feel like they didn't get their money's worth. Like I refuse to do that. And it was funny because we started playing and because they hadn't heard the compositions. Like I'd taken him over to Stanley's place to show him what I had, and he basically said, okay, yeah, we got a record, we're gonna be good. But they didn't really know what I was planning on doing. So to get into this, and we recorded the Arco piece first, because that's, from a technical standpoint, that's the most challenging, and it's just so naked, it's so exposed. And I'm definitely I do my best not to disrespect the tradition of the bow when I'm playing it. But, you know, to do that, I wanted that out of the way as fast as possible. Like I didn't want the feeling of it's still there, you still got to do it. Like I wanted that pressure off as soon as possible. But they hadn't heard it, so we did the first take, and Jake came in the room, and I had no idea it was going to be something like this. This is sick. And it was such a fun moment of, I think they just thought I was gonna kind of wing it and just improvise the whole thing, or I don't know, but it we definitely all left that session, everybody left on such a high. Like it was just such a great day. And we're telling stories, and I mean, Sebastian, the engineer, he worked with everybody. So for him and Stanley, we're hanging and we're having like barbecue like pulled pork sandwiches for lunch. And just, hearing Stan and Sebastian swap stories from just cats having been in the game for 60 plus years. It was just a really beautiful day. And I walked Stanley out after the session. And this is also how another reason I feel so great about JMI. I already had, but I left and he said, hey, you stick with these dudes. These are good dudes. They're serious. You're in a good spot being with these guys.
Yeah.
Sure. All the encouragement I need.
Yeah. And just like on the record side, like you were mentioning that they're serious about test pressings, that the whole packaging piece is, top notch. The recording sessions and the personnel that are involved are top notch. As people who love jazz, we just want to do our little part to help promote it because we just think they're a great label.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the service that you guys do for the music. I mean, this is so cool to be able to just hang and talk records and talk shop and the craft.
Yeah,
I really enjoy stuff like this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's talk about Hard Pan a little bit. How did that record come about? I know it's you and Mike Mitchell, which is pretty cool since y'all are childhood friends.
Yep. So that record, I believe that was actually Jake and Steve's idea. That was their pitch to us, because at the time Mike was doing a record for them and I was doing a record for them. But just from hanging, like they knew our relationship. And I kind of started the way my career started was kind of like a package deal with him. And then he's gone on, that time he had his stuff developed. He went straight from high school to Stanley's band. And then I went to school and then, came to the field years later. But so by that point, we kind of established this thing as we're sort of that's a great picture. We sort of established this thing as a little bit of a tandem. And, but that's how we used to practice. That's why we set up like that, of just like, they put the amp in the closet and they mic'd it up. But I mean, this is how we used to practice. Like he would, my mom basically made the house open to my friends, and if we wanted to come and play, we could set stuff up and we could play. And we would set up like this in my mom's studio essentially, and we would just sit down and just go for hours and hours. And sometimes we'd have guitar players or keys players, our friends would come, but then there would be times where it would just be us two. And I remember like one session in particular where I was really trying to work on the inner urge chord changes, like the last 8, these major 7s that move in a symmetrical pattern that were really stumping me. And Mike loves that tune also. So I said, hey, let's kind of like hang on inner urge for a while. So we would trade choruses where he would comp and I'd take a chorus and try and blow through it. And then he would take a chorus and I would walk through it and keep time for him. And I remember, I think we did just that and just kept it going like an hour and a half without stopping, just, pushing each other. And I would play a rhythmic idea and he would take that and he would develop it and he would finish his chorus with some crazy thing. And I would try and take that and just kind of playing a game of telephone with these notoriously difficult chord changes. And so it seemed like such an organic thing. Like, here we are, we used to just do this for fun, and here we are. People want to record it. So it was an interesting moment. I definitely was swimming in the nostalgia during that session.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky enough to get. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, any idea when Hard Pan is going to be released?
That is a great question, because I've got another record that I did for JMI. We recorded in either August or September, and so that's another one that between the two of them, I'm not sure what the status is with which one's going to come first. But should be soon though. I'm pretty sure that they want Hard Pan out ASAP, because it's been almost a year since we tracked it, and I know that they usually they don't want to have that much dead time between session and release.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to get vinyl pressed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine.
We were lucky enough to they sent us some files to listen to, and Inner Urge made the record, and that was really badass tune, man. I like that a lot. I listened to that this morning. Can you talk about the you may not even know yet what's going to be on which tunes are going to be on the record, but what's like the combo between like stuff you and Mike composed or you composed versus like standards?
So pretty much everything. That record was one that when we talked about what we were going to do for this record, we only kind of talked about like a concept. We didn't really compose for this because we felt this is essentially it felt like us, like we're documenting like one of our childhood practice sessions. We just happen to be adults now. It was sort of how it felt. So I think we kind of shied away from the concept of preparing stuff for it. Also because we weren't going to be able to rehearse it. Like we essentially had he was coming off a gig and I was flying in the day before. So it's just, well, we're going to meet in the studio. So let's just kind of do what we did. Let's just be like, hey, let's practice this. So there's a few things in there that are like house music beats. And when we were in high school, we used to play for a group of rappers. So we would be, doing jazz at the school, and then we would go to these hip hop shows, and we'd be the only like band there, and we're just trying to play, like Slum Village or like Jay Dilla tracks and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
that's wanted to put that on. Let's do something kind of like that. That's
awesome. Oh my god, that's so cool.
So like it was. Yeah, there's a lot of years there, and then there's like one song that's like kind of punk-esque. I grew up on rock and metal music, and he grew up in gospel music, and it's not that far of a leap to get from one to the other in terms of energy of the music. Yep. So I remember, like I was, Mike, I would love when we were kids because he had so much technique. Mike, I'd love to hear you on some metal music. Do you ever play any like double bass drum? He's like, what kind of stuff are you into? And I remember I put on well, obviously Meshuggah. I mean, we're all diehard Meshuggah guys. But I think I put on a song from a band called the Black Dahlia Murder, and he's like, "This seems a little dark," and I played it. And he's like, "Okay, sick." So then there was that thing where like we were kind of introducing each other to new music when we were kids, and there's like we never did that. We never did any metal stuff together, but that was always kind of like it'd be fun if we ever got like a call to like a metal gig together. So like it really, that record really was, I think, for us sort of paying a testament to all the different things that we did together as kids, you know, learning to play music together. And he was just so far ahead of me when we were, I mean, I met him when we were 13. And I mean, he sounded like what he sounds like now. It wasn't as mature, but I mean, the same technique. It was just absurd. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And at the time, I had one chop and no idea. So like, he was super patient with me, and I mean, really took the time to, you know, hit me with records, and you know, we would go on a gig where we had to kind of do like a little bit of a glass for experiment thing, because at the time black radio had like just come out, and so that was the thing. And especially Chris Davey from Houston, down the road from Dallas, all the Texas cats were trying to do similar stuff. So we're doing a lot of that, and we played, and he had just total command over sort of Chris's concept. And so we'd get done with the gig, he'd be like, "Hey, what you're doing is cool. Like, I like where you're coming from, but check this record out. Listen to the way Derek Hodge plays behind Chris. Listen to the way that Derek backs this up. Listen to how like Thaddeus Tribbett hangs in this situation, stuff like that." So he really was like very hands-on with how my concept of playing bass in a lot of different scenarios. Like, he had a real hand in leading me to the records that I got my idea from. So I'm always going to be super grateful for our time together, and that he chose to wait for me to get my stuff together. Because I mean, he could have just, at the time, I mean, when we were kids, he could have been like, "Well, these guys can't play," and he would have just gone and played with people who could. But I mean, he waited, you know. He found some people he wanted to be around, and he waited for us to get it together, and I'm so grateful he did.
Well, we've been going now for over an hour, so I do want, we can probably do another 2 hours here, but I do think, you know, kind of like the common thread throughout what you were sharing is like your relationships have really kind of helped fuel you and your kind of approach to your craft, and it's kind of incredible, your journey, and I know this is, you know, pretty much like just the beginning. I mean, you're just putting out stuff for JMI, but as you kind of develop, we would love to have you back and kind of, you know, hear about your new projects that you're working on, new players that you're collaborating with, and whatever you're doing. So doors open. You're welcome back anytime.
Well, cheers. Thank you very much. And I would really like to be back. This is a super fun conversation.
Yeah. Guys, any final questions or thoughts for Max?
Yeah, just thanks for joining us, and I really enjoy the time and hearing your stories, and I'm looking forward to getting your records when they come out, man.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Much appreciated.
Thanks for meeting us today, Max. And I think, you know, chats we're having with you and some other remarkable, you know, current performers, musicians, songwriters, I think just highlights how, you know, in a great era for jazz and great music to be being made these days. And you know, of course, we drink a lot from the past, but there's so much going on right now. Then we should totally value original work, especially. And we thank you so much for doing at such a high level and very relatable at the same time.
Oh, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the kind words. And I echo the sentiment. I think that there's never, the information is so accessible that just the age that some of these new players are arriving, like there's a kid in town named Cosimo Lieberman, who I don't think he's 18 yet, and I do a Holdsworth tribute band in town, and we have Gary Novak on drums, who, you know, played on 16 Men of Tame, and so doing that with him, he kind of keeps us correct about how to do that. And so we had Cosimo, he's an alto saxophone player. We had this, at the time, 16-year-old alto saxophone player come in, and we had him sitting on a song called Funnels, which harmonically is just a bear to get through. And he went crazy. And I remember like walking up the gate, like, this guy's 16? How? It doesn't make any sense. Like, not just like, and not just like the command of the horn or the command of the language. He sounded like he'd been gigging for 20 years. It's unbelievable. So I'm just in awe of how strong these younger players are these days, and it's only going to increase the more accessible the information gets. So I agree wholeheartedly that I think we're in and are entering an era where the contributions from young jazz musicians is going to be something to be a part. I'm honored to be a part of it, and it's going to be something to behold. I really believe that.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Same.
All right. Well, for those watching, drop a comment. Let us know what you thought about this. Share it, like it. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. So thanks for tuning in. All right. See you.
Thank you.
You guys.